Hello and welcome to the Adafruit CircuitPython Weekly for October 1st, 2018. I'm Scott and I work on CircuitPython for Adafruit. CircuitPython is an open source project to bring embedded Python to beginners. That means inexpensive computers are easily accessible to beginners so that they can learn how to program in the context of hardware, so blinking and buttons and interaction stuff rather than just text on a screen. This meeting happens every week at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, here on our Discord channel. We're all sitting in the voice chat called CircuitPython on our Discord. If you want to join our Discord, feel free to do so any time of the week. You can go to the URL adafru.it/discord to join. We have a text chat that kind of runs the whole week, but we do this voice chat on Mondays. The voice chat is recorded. I record both the visuals of the text channel, which is the CircuitPython text channel, not the live broadcast one. And then I also record both my audio and audio from the folks in the chat. So you can listen to it afterwards if you didn't know that. We also take notes to go along with it that include time codes. So if you want to see what was discussed and not listen to the whole thing, but seek to the particular parts that might be interesting, you can do that as well. The videos go up on the Adafruit YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Adafruit, and the notes are linked to from there. There as a GitHub gist on there as well. The meeting is 4 sections. We first start with a state of CircuitPython and its libraries section, and then we'll do a hug report section, which is a chance to say thank you to folks for different things they've done in the last week. And that is done as a round robin. So I will start and then go down the list of the people in the voice chat, which turns out to be alphabetical. Once we do that, we'll do another round robin for status updates, which is basically like what you've been working on and what you plan to work on in the future, or like in the coming week. And then lastly, we have a kind of in the weeds discussion section where we talk about larger technical topics or community topics, all that sort of thing. That is kind of like maybe the least interesting or the least information dense, but could be really interesting. So again, check the notes for topics on that if you just want to see what we're talking about. Okay, so let's get going on State of CircuitPython. I will take a time code and get going. First, I'll talk about, in general, so this is both the CircuitPython core repo and the libraries. I'll delegate to Kattni after I cover some of the broader stuff first. So we had 15 pull requests merged overall with 8 different authors and 6 different reviewers, which is actually feels like more reviewers than we normally have, which is awesome. And the 8 author list looks pretty typical. I wanted to shout out to Adam Hale for a new. We met him at Maker Faire, and also he made a pull request, which is cool. It hasn't been merged yet, but thanks to Adam for that. We have 8 open pull requests on CircuitPython, the core CircuitPython stuff, which is kind of a lot. And I was looking at it last night and really want to work through those and get that number down. So be aware that we should do that. And then we had 10 issues closed overall by 5 people, and we had 12 opens by 9 people. So we are kind of growing in the number of issues. 146 of those are on CircuitPython, and there's a link to where to find those. And then I'll let Kattni talk about the libraries.
Okay, hopefully my audio is good because everybody else sounds garbled.
You sound fine to me.
Excellent. So we have 10 open pull requests on different libraries, and 53 open issues on libraries. This is something that as the project has grown, we have definitely kind of let slide to the wayside, and I want to apologize about that and say that that's definitely something that we're going to start working on. So if you currently have open issues or open pull requests on these repos, expect to see some action on those in the very upcoming weeks. And thank you for your patience with all of this. Obviously, any project has growing pains, and we are growing into ours. So other than that, we've got a lot of other repo specific issues that I'm not going to get into super details about, but they are available in the notes. And that's another thing that we're going to start looking at, and any help with that is always welcome. So I'm still not quite sure how I'm going to start handling that, but I think it may be something like doing weekly roundups and requests for assistance and that sort of thing. But we'll figure it out. So that's what I have.
Totally. Yeah, and I just wanted to point out also, and this I'll talk about this a little bit later, but everybody, there's the Hacktoberfest, which is a thing sponsored by DigitalOcean. You get a T-shirt if you do 5 pull requests in October. You may have seen some of us working on that, so beware that you can get a cool Hacktoberfest shirt, and all of these issues that Kattni's talking about, or the issues that show up in Adabot, are great reasons to make small PRs, which are super helpful and good to get going with. So if you need things to do for those 5 or more, take a look at the notes for that. Lastly, I'll just talk briefly about the download stats and where we're at. So again, I was traveling in the last week, so I didn't get a lot of time to, or I didn't get any time to update Adabot to talk about languages specifically. I'm planning on doing that later after the newsletter's done. But on the Alpha 1, we're now at a total of 254 downloads, which is up from 30, so that's really good because it's marked as a pre-release. It's not marked as a stable release. So that's 220 total downloads since last week, so that's really good. And these numbers are pulled last night, so those numbers will be a little bit higher at this point. 3.02 has 16 or 1,646 total downloads as well. All pretty standard stuff. In general, we've kind of, the 3 core team members, Dan, Kattni, and I, were gone, and so we're really at a turning point where we're focused on 4.0. We're focusing, because Kattni's kind of stepped up to manage all the library stuff. We're going to be doing a better job at library maintenance as well, because I didn't have the bandwidth to do it, so having her do that is awesome. So expect to see 4.0 development really take off. We want to do a pretty quick release cadence on the 4.0 alphas, so expect to see improvements there. And then also on the library side, you should be able to see kind of the pace quicken as Kattni does more work and facilitates the direction of other people's work as well. So all good things. In general, actually, I'll talk about that later. All good things. We'll start there and we'll go into hug reports instead. Okay, so I'll do hug reports. I won't spoil my status update yet. So hug reports briefly is a chance for you to say thank you to people for the work they've been doing in the community. This is good for 2 reasons. One, it's good because saying thank you is always a good thing. It's really easy and expected to complain about things, but making time to thank people for their work is more important than complaining on the internet. And then also, because we talk publicly about the things that we value, we build kind of expectations within our community about what things are valued, and so it's good for that as well. So I will start. Okay, yeah, and I can send the link again. Kattni's just having some audio issues. There's the notes doc for people who want to follow along or maybe add their hug reports and status updates in there as well. But everybody should be able to edit it. Okay, so I'll do hug reports. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to Summersoft for helping out on the Discord kind of in the last week when I was just gone. And just looking back, it's always nice to see somebody there helping people, which is awesome. Not Summersoft, of course, is not the only person, but I noticed Summersoft's participation in particular. I wanted to say thank you to Entol for the Mu 101 release. It's exciting to see that progressing. which is good. And also happy to see it announced on Discord as well, which is great. And then also wanted to say thank you to Dan and Katney for their advocacy of CircuitPython at the Open Hardware Summit. We went in there kind of like really wanting to get people on board with supporting CircuitPython and building it as a project that's broader than Adafruit alone. And so we did some really good work with that. Dan and Katney went to some events that I couldn't make because I was hanging out with friends instead. So it's nice to be able to kind of like do things independently, and also for people to hear about CircuitPython from different perspectives as well. So thank you. Those are my hub reports. Brennan, do you want to say yours? Or Brennan says group hub. Carter?
Yeah, one to Summersoft for reviewing the CAP 1118 pull request that I put in. And another one again to Katney for taking up the library stuff. I think that's going to be, I'm really excited that someone's actually focaling all that.
Cool. All right, Charles?
Well, all I got is a group hug because I didn't do very much this week because I was way on business. So I'm sort of lacking this week.
No worries. I know how that is.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Okay, Dan.
So I was typing and I think back in mode here. So thanks to Scott and Katney for being together with me at the Open Hardware Summit. We had a great time together, sort of both socially and to do Adafruit advocacy, as Scott mentioned. Thanks to Drew Fustini, who works some of the time for Adafruit and does a lot of other things, who we saw a lot of at the Open Hardware Summit. He made the badges, and we talked to him a lot about different issues and about the BeagleBone and just about a bazillion things. It was great. And then thanks also to Jerry again for continuing to test the 4.0 alpha and finding various issues, which always give me work to do when I come back to the keyboard. So it's been coming back from all this travel, especially. But thank you, because it's really helpful to know what to work on next and to clean up the rough edges of whatever we have. And I think I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay.
Deshipu. Deshipu says, thanks to Maddie T for reaching out to try and get us to cooperate between CircuitPython and MicroPython. Yeah, good discussion. Okay. All right, Drew? Dan,
Yeah,
you're unmuted
yeah.
still, Dan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Drew.
Okay. Thanks to Katney and Dan, I got to check out a workshop that they did at a local university in Boston. It's really interesting to see people using CircuitPython on the playground and the Gemma, seeing like the different challenges and successes they had with it, and just kind of for myself, because I haven't used it a lot personally, just it was interesting to see how people use it. So that was fun to see.
All right. Thanks, Drew. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, a group hug to all, and a special shout out to Dan for always welcoming my bug reports and and fixing them quickly. So thanks for the new stuff on the NRF52 and the SPI and ITC, all that good stuff. And also it is, I second the comment from before. It's great to see Katney taking the libraries on and pushing that ahead. It's nice to have a focal point.
Yeah, totally. All right. Thanks, Jerry. Katney?
Yeah, so I want to first and foremost say thank you to Dan for hosting me for Open Hardware Summit. I stayed with Dan while I was there, and he took me on a tour of Boston. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Scott and Dan for an excellent trip. Open Hardware Summit was great. It was wonderful to see you guys, and I definitely would not have been able to navigate the trains without you. So thank you for that. I want to give a shout out to Adam and Hale for their first PR to CircuitPython, and they may be writing a new driver for us, so that should be really cool. Thanks to everyone for holding down Discord while we were traveling. I keep saying it, but I'll say it again. It's so amazing to be able to step away and have everything remain smooth. To everyone we met at Open Hardware Summit, it was amazing to meet you. Clarissa, Noah, Steven, Stephanie, Jason, Drew, Andrew, Andy, Monica, Alex, Becky, Christy, Matt, Joe, Amitabh, Jimmy, Addie, Alicia, and everyone else I've missed. Thank you for taking the time to chat. I had a ton of lovely discussions, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of them. Thank you to Drew for his involvement with OHS, lovely conversation, and for picking up a couple of lifts and meals. And thank you for the invite to PS1. I will be taking you up on that in a couple of months for sure. Thanks to Entol for the Mu update. It's excellent to see more development happening on that. And thanks to Carter and Jerry for jumping in on the lib issue discussion when we posted it. More discussion is always helpful, and it's always good to see more involvement. So thank you for that.
All right, thanks, Katney. Okay, Mike. I can't hear Mike. Can other people hear me?
No.
Mike is great. Mike says, great to see everyone at Maker Faire. I can put names to faces. Summersoft, why don't you go ahead and put yours in as well? Or, sorry, yeah, Sedacious. Do you have a mic? Okay. All right. I think the last two folks are text as well. So just read it off. So Mike also says, thanks for all the help with CircuitPython on the last 2 weeks. Sedacious says, group hug and one for Katney for getting the max 31856 repo set up. I'll totally make a PR when I can convince Git to report my pseudonym correctly. Also to Carter for resolving my .star live PR that will allow me to use fancy LED with them now. I'll put in the same for NeoPixels when I get a spare minute, unless someone beats me to it. Summersoft says just a Gigantosaurus group hug this week. Friends slightly unprepared this week. I know what you mean. I was up at like midnight last night trying to get my notes together and just realized that I'm still slightly jet lagged, so not quite on point like I am. Okay, so let's call that hug reports. STW is lurking, so I can train lags totally. Okay, let's do status updates. I'll take the time for. Status updates is a very software engineering sort of thing where people stand up in a circle and talk about what they've been working on and what they plan on working on. We won't have to stand up here unless you really want to. We won't be able to tell whether or not you are, but we'll do a similar thing. So we'll do another round robin, and we'll talk. Like everybody should take a couple minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, to talk about what they've been working on and what they plan on working on in the coming week. I will start after I take a time code. So I got back into town on Friday, was at Maker Faire and Open Hardware Summit, so a lot of just chatting with people about CircuitPython, really trying to get CircuitPython to be a project bigger than Adafruit. I had a discussion with, we had discussions with Lamore and Phil about this, and they're on board with it. We actually had a discussion this morning that was very exciting about, I think with 4.0, we had this problem where now that we have translations, it's really hard to pick the right download for what you want. So we want to do a web design so that you can just like pick the board you have and then try to then pick the language you want and get the right bundle and all of that. So if anybody is a web designer, please reach out and help us design this downloads page. Once we have that downloads page, I want to just actually take it on ourselves to support non-Adafruit SAMD21 boards. SparkFun has a few, and Tiny Circuits has a few as well. And I want to start making it clear, I want to make it more clear that CircuitPython is bigger than just Adafruit. They're obviously a huge supporter of us, and we'll always make sure that our boards are best served as well. But that doesn't mean that we can't support other boards well as well, if that makes sense. So that was something kind of that we've been working on and something we'll touch on in the future. When I was in New York, I got a Trellis Express, which I'm not sure, I think was a top secret on Ask an Engineer. It's basically an all-in-one board that has 2 Trellis elastomer keypads and then an M4 on the back, and you can use it for all sorts of different things. I'm actually using it as a shortcut keys thing, so like Control-C, Control-V, and all that. So I got that prototype working. I started audio in work, which is like based on the timer to record stuff. I'm actually going to put that on pause. And I also put the display IO extra stuff on pause as well. I was talking earlier, and it's very kind of like my stack of like things I'm working on is just growing, which is kind of disconcerting. But talking with Lamore, she really wants to be able to do multiple audio playback at once. So I'll be kind of jumping on doing an audio mixer sort of thing, which will be cool. And then Adabot improvements for languages. So Adabot needs some touch-ups, and I'm going to do that today, just to reorganize the way it generates stuff a little bit. And then lastly, Hacktoberfest starts today. I talked about this a little bit already, but if people can go in, if you have access to labels on GitHub, if you find things that are good for Hacktoberfest, there's a label in there already from last year. Please mark things, especially in the libraries. We didn't do that, so let's make sure that we get listed on the Hacktoberfest stuff and that we're on their radar, so that we can all get more T-shirts. And yeah, I think that's it. I know I've gone on a while, so that's it for me. Brennan, do you want to type in? Or try your mic again? It was weird that other people could hear you, but I couldn't hear you.
Heard him fine.
Yeah, I can't hear you. You look muted to me as well. Maybe did I mute? Oh, I totally muted you. Huh. Okay, try now.
Check.
There we go. Sorry, for some reason I had you muted.
No, you
Right.
can hear. We can't.
So last week, just getting back into testing CircuitPython library stuff on the Raspberry Pi. Right now, working on one of the GPS modules and updating some of the guides for using that on the Pi, and then there's a whole long list of stuff we're going to work on next. I think Kattni will probably talk more about that.
Cool, thanks, Brennan. And sorry I had you muted earlier. I think your mic was making noise last week, and I had you muted that. Thanks to everybody for letting me know that you all could hear me. Okay, Carter.
Yeah, I did a quick test and merge the .star fix that Sedacious mentioned. That was a very simple fix, but a very subtle error. So it's kind of cool that he came across that and was able to fix it. It's one of those ones you wouldn't see by just scanning the code. It doesn't jump out at you. And then I did an initial PR for the CAP 1188. I think that's the model number of it. Capacitive touch sensor. So that's kind of sitting there, but I've screwed up the connection to Travis and stuff like that. So we need to fix that so it's getting checked, and then we can have a code review of that, and hopefully we'll get that merged in.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for all your work on the libraries as well. Okay, Charles.
Well, I'm still working on the fingering pad for my music project, but I'm having trouble with the MCP 23017. I'm gonna put in an issue and see if somebody can tell me if I'm doing something wrong.
Okay.
So that's where I am.
Okay, that sounds good. Issues are a good way to figure that stuff out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. All right, Dan.
So I wrote some stuff down, but I'll read it out loud. So obviously we went to the Open Hardware Summit. That took a lot of, it was fun and it was a lot of time and energy. It took several days of things. One interesting thing is that several events were at this gigantic makerspace that's in a town next to Boston called Somerville. There's 43,000 square feet of everything from an electronics lab to like a 5 by 10 foot CNC machine, plus a paint shop and a machine shop, and just a huge amount of space. So we had fun touring that and hanging out there. And then there are, I worked on the train. I worked on fixing a bug about resetting the NRF peripherals in 4.0, and that was just pulled in this morning. There were some other SPI issues, which I'm debugging about SPI speed complaints. And I'm just continuing to trundle along in NRF implementation. So that's, and there are various support issues, which always come up. So that's it.
Cool. Thanks for your hard work on the NRF stuff. It's going to be very cool when it gets done.
Yeah.
All right, Shifu says, made a release of the firmware for a microgame with CircuitPython 3.02 without including all the stuff I wanted to have. It's been too long already. Also, 5 CircuitPython badge prototypes were given to volunteers at the last PyCon UK, and now we are discussing ways to improve them. Yeah, and you got tweeted out by Hackaday, so that hit the Twitter feeds for some things, and I think will probably be in the newsletter today as well. Super interesting. Cool. Drew?
Yeah, I just got back from traveling for like almost last 2 weeks, so I'm gonna be looking at getting SPI and ITC working in Blinka for the BeagleBone. So I'll be working on that this week. So hopefully have some news next Monday.
Awesome. Look forward to it. All right, Jerry.
Much of the week was spent at a family wedding, which was a lot of fun, but not overly productive in CircuitPython world. And managed to play with. I managed to get a couple of PIR keys from DigiKey, so I've been playing with them a little bit and having fun, and just testing out some of the things with the trying to hook up some devices to the NRF 52840 dongle board. So I've got the SPI SD card working on it, and an I2C interface to LAS3DH accelerometer. So just checking out to make sure those interfaces worked okay, and they do, with some minor little issues that Dan's fixing. And hopefully now the travel over and things like that, get back into more things this week and start looking at some of the PRs that are out there and some of the issues and see if I can help with those.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like that's the theme of the week, of people getting back from travel and getting back into things. Cool. I'm excited to see how it goes. All right, Kathy.
All right. So last week was Open Hardware Summit. Met a lot of amazing people, learned a lot of new things, got to see an amazing makerspace in Boston, which Dan talked about. Had a ton of fun with that. This week is digging in and getting back into the swing of things. Getting back into PyPI, we are about half done with the updates, guide updates, getting everything tested. Most of the libraries are already in PyPI. However, only about half of them have been tested. So that's the next, we do that part first, and then we go and we test them all. So apparently the part we've done has been the easy part. So now we have the hard part. The next, the priority that I've got is I'm going to be working on a couple of new libraries, working on a couple of simple I2 C libs, and then we're going to be moving on from there. Most of the priority is being set. However, if you hear about or have any libs that you would like to see be tested, either, I mean, they're in PyPI, so feel free to test them on your own and let me know. But let me know if there's something that you want or need, and we can see if we can work it into the priority. And what I talked about earlier is it's library time. So we're going to be starting to work through the open PRs and issues on the library repos, as well as the repo specific issues noted. The stuff that's noted in Adabot, all the issues with the actual repos. Like I said, I'm still not sure how I plan to handle this, given that I just took it over. But I kind of want to try and put together maybe a weekly roundup with requests for help on different things, something like that. We'll see how it evolves. Suggestions are welcome, and obviously, whatever it is it's going to evolve as we get into it, because this is a new thing. So if you have open PRs and issues on libraries, expect to see some action on those. And again, like I said earlier, thank you so much for your patience with everything. I know we've kind of let a lot of the library stuff slip, and that's something that we are going to be working on. So hopefully that won't be happening in the future. So thank you for that, and thank you for all of everyone who's been doing help with the libraries. We really appreciate it, and we definitely will be trying to stay more on top of that now. So that's what I have.
Sweet. Yeah, looking forward to that. Very good. I'm excited to see it go forward. I'm just like brainstorming Adabot changes while you're talking about that.
Yeah, and I'm super excited about that too. I mean, you saw my massive spreadsheet, so if Adabot is spitting out things that I don't have to make a spreadsheet for, it makes my life much easier.
Right. Yeah, I like all the like linting and quotes, doing air quotes, that Adabot does about how repos are set up and whether they're in PyPI and all that sort of stuff. So we should continue to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like if anyone wants to help with this stuff, I mean, that's why I want to try and set up some kind of thing where it's not just in these weekly notes, that it's a library specific thing where, people can go and, figure out stuff that they can help with, or something like that. So, like I said, I don't really know what that's going to look like, but that is my plan.
Sounds good. Okay. Yeah. Carter says, should we have a dedicated library status section for the meeting? That was actually one thing I was I was just thinking about, of like, maybe I should just explain it as 5 sections. So I'll play around with that for the notes, because the notes are the framework for the meeting. So,
Yeah, we rearranged the notes, or I rearranged the notes earlier today so that there is sort of a separate library section.
Yeah.
But we didn't, I guess, well, it's delineated by the fact that Scott talks about CircuitPython and I talk about the library stuff. So we are sort of planning on doing that. It's just a question of how much detail I'm going to get into,
Yeah.
and so on. So that's the part that's, I think, going to start evolving.
Yeah, and I think we could split the metrics for issues and PRs and stuff across that boundary if we wanted to as well.
Okay.
Just so that we can highlight like the number of library contributors versus support contributors.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
So I'll play around with that later.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. And of course we can always change it. Mike's microphone is not working, so I'll just read off. He says, I've mainly been working on the newsletter. If you'd like to receive the weekly newsletter for Python on microcontrollers, visit adafruitdaily.com and sign up. It's spam free. Your info is never sold, and you can leave anytime without hassle. Again, this is a newsletter that's all about CircuitPython, MicroPython, CPython stuff. And it's also developed on GitHub, so if you have stuff you want to show, you're making a custom board or just announce something, feel free to do a PR on that repo. We're happy to have other people do that as well. Sedacious, what's your update? Woo! Sedacious says, got my 1x1 SAMD21 board up and running and half assembled, mainly fiddling with itty bitty dot stars mounted and wired on my micro breakouts. I missed the deadline for the contest, but I'm trying to get it finished just to say I did. I might do a revision without the dot stars as a fun general purpose portable board, and will probably inevitably make an M4 version. I'll send out my CP-32 M4 board once I get it. I work with Oshpark Drew on my micro USB footprint issue, and I can make a new footprint for the newer, better connector. My other battery power board will also see another revision to try to lower the BOM cost and adjust some dimensions. I spent airport time working on my board design tutorial and realized it probably wants to be a three-parter. So I got about halfway through the first draft of the first part, though many parts will probably be best described in video form. So I'll have to think about doing that as a companion. In non-programming news, I helped move my mom's from Arizona to Nevada and saw many Tesla chargers on the way. Cool, do you have a Tesla? And P.S. If anyone has suggestions for accessories to get with a first oscilloscope, please let me know. With any luck, I'll finally be getting a DS1054Z after squirreling away ducats and shekels for a while now. End novel and no Tesla. I would actually, I use my Salier a lot more. If you don't have a Salier, I would actually buy that before an oscilloscope. That's my preference. Okay, yeah. Sedacious says a Logic 8. So yeah, oscilloscope next. Totally. And I use it, I even use the analog side of a Logic to just, know if, audio is being output on an analog pin. I don't need the higher refresh rate that an oscilloscope gets, but it still tells me whether it's working or not, which is cool. I forgot to take a time. Okay, last but not least, Somersault says, for the frequency in, it was dormant this week. For the FRAM library, I2C is ready for initial PR, sending one Sphinx fix. We'll start SPI after that is pushed. Cool, sounds great. Okay, that is the status updates. I don't think I missed anybody. So thank you, everybody. It's exciting to hear all the different things that are going on in CircuitPython land. That's what status updates are all about. So now we'll do what we call lovingly call our In the Weeds section, where we discuss a variety of topics that kind of have come up earlier in the meeting or earlier in the week. And the way that we do this is, those of you watching may have noticed that a few people already put into the text chat topics for In the Weeds. So thank you for doing that. And again, if other people have topics for In the Weeds, please post them in there. We have kind of a running list of Weeds topics in the doc, thanks to Katney, I believe, is the anonymous alligator for me. So I'll just run down that list and take time codes for each of those topics. So first on the list is what to do with dot frozen lives per issue 93. Dan, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the point of this is that Katney and I especially, and I'm sure other people have seen support cases that come up where someone is using a board with frozen libraries, either the Cricut or more likely the CPX, and they run out of memory because they have accidentally, or not accidentally, but sort of almost by default, they are overriding the frozen libraries with the libraries that are in lib. So if they download and put a complete lib folder on their machine, because sys.path, which says which directories to look in first when you import things, because sys.path includes lib before .frozen. That means that, for instance, they will get like the CPX library, the CPX helper library will end up being read from the lib directory instead of the frozen one being used. And when that happens, use up a lot of RAM. And the same thing is true for any of the other libraries that are frozen in. I mean, the CPX library, when it's imported, already changes sys.path, so it uses the frozen ones in preference. So it will use frozen NeoPixel and frozen LIS3DH, but the initial one might still not work that way. And this would be true on the CPX, on the Cricket builds, which have a lot of frozen libraries, and also on the Perky, which isn't available right now, but which would have IR remote built in, for instance. But it doesn't have, the Perky doesn't have a SPI flash chip, so it's sort of less likely that that would happen. So the question is, how do we get around this? I had originally proposed maybe having, well, the basic idea is to put .frozen before lib in sys.path so that it looks in the frozen first.
Right.
And then there are variants on that, like, well, where do you keep an extra copy of the library around in lib, or do you put it in lib in some other folder, which I think isn't necessary. That's what I proposed, but I now think it isn't necessary. So I guess I would just like to hear from the community, or we would like to hear, like, what do they think of this? And do they have some alternate suggestions? And that's what we'd like to talk about. Should we make this change for 3 or for 4? That's an open question. Okay.
Is there any easy way to get a list of what is frozen into your particular version of CircuitPython so that you can not, maybe put the lib versions aside?
There is no easy way right now. You can't do os.listdir of .frozen. It doesn't work.
But you can do a help modules.
That's a good point. Good point.
There we go. That answers the question.
That's much better.
Right. Take the do a help modules before you start adding to see what's internally, what's internal and what's not. In other words, basically what's coming from frozen libraries and what's coming from. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That'll solve. That will do just fine for what I had in mind. I'm going to try something and then report back.
So I guess if I don't know, Carter, if you have any, well, I think you already said something. There's an issue on this. It's issue 93 in the burn. Yeah.
I mean,
I linked to it in the chat.
Okay, good. All right.
I mean, my feeling is that, like, I replied to this issue last night as well. Like, the real issue is that frozen is a mechanic that we're using to save memory, whereas, like, we could actually come up with ways to actually save the memory in general, and then we don't need to use this frozen mechanic for it at all. I think that's idyllic, and it's a lot more work than just changing the path order. I think if we do choose to do the path order changes, then we'll want to do a major version bump, because we will potentially break people, because we're changing behavior, like core behavior.
Yeah. So I agree that your ideas are a lot more work, as you were saying. And major version bump makes sense. Switching just .frozen and /lib still allows for putting, an updated library in root and being able to utilize it. So we're not backing ourselves into any corners with this.
Do we run the same risk of people getting confused though?
I mean, the thing is, I guess we could. Yes, I did make that point. We're still gonna have to address that possibility, but I feel like that's a far less common issue than people just having the whole lib folder.
From the bundle.
Yeah. And my initial thought, actually, in my discussion with Dan, my first thought was actually to put frozen before root as well. But I think at that point we are kind of backing ourselves into a corner where we can't test updated frozen libs without doing an entire build. So I think the best solution is to switch lib and frozen, leave root alone, deal with the possibility of that uncommon support issue coming up, and still having that opportunity for ourselves or anyone else who wants to test a library to have that easy way to do it without having to do an entire build themselves with a new frozen library.
Couldn't you do the trick I posted in the comment for testing the updated library?
Yeah, the big problem with that is it means that you have to have you have to change your code, which certainly is doable, but you have to.
Yeah.
You can't just
and for testing, I think that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Because that would be stuff we are doing. I wouldn't imagine this testing would be anything we'd want to put on to the end user.
Well,
and I think that's. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think that's actually good for testing in general. And when you do want to test, with an unchanged code, you can always drop it in root temporarily too. So I think you have the best of both worlds there. So I think that works great.
That's kind of what I think.
I mean,
as well.
My issue is that I just don't like. I don't like using frozen modules for this. Like, I don't like having different CPX builds for different uses. I don't.
But what other solution do we really have right now without a lot?
Fix the memory. Like, fix the actual problem. Like, the actual problem is that we can't import as much as we want. We're importing a bunch of crap we don't actually use. Like, that's my problem with it. Is like
I can't personally speak to how much work that is because I don't know. I don't have a clue what would go into.
Right. I mean, I think that is the long-term right solution, but I think right now we have people are having this issue now, and it would be, I think it would be like when you were saying a major version bump. Do you mean we would make this change in 4.0 but not in 3.1? Or you're saying it's 3.1? If we had a 3.1, would that be okay? It depends.
Yeah, it just depends on how you understand sensitive.
One thing that I've noticed is that, and I've been sort of looking for this for quite a while, is that I don't think anywhere in the documentation, there's lots of places where it says, grab the lib directory and drop it on your express board because you got the room for it. But nowhere that I think, unless it's been updated recently, does it warn you about these problems? And so part of it just might be education, and people might get used to it to say, if you're using one of these boards that has the frozen modules, then when you put the lib in there, you should go take these things out. And part of it says that's a good thing for people to learn so they understand a little bit about how this thing works. I found myself doing that routinely. Now, whenever I get a CPX, I drop the whole lib in there, or I copy the lib over to another directory, remove all the things that I know are going to be in my way, and then I copy them over, which is a little bit of a pain, but not bad. But the thing is, it's not documented anywhere that I'm aware of.
Suppose there was a separate bundle that was just for CPX.
That would be a good thing, I think. You might need a bunch of bundles, one for CPX, one for CPX Cricket, one for Feather Cricket. Well, you don't need one for Feather Cricket necessarily, but it depends on all the choices. One for per key, which would be fine.
So that's an alternative where we don't flip. That would be an upward compatible change. And
except for the fact that now you have to explain to people which bundle, and we already had that problem because we have 3 of them.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, either you always have to explain something, right? And the ideal solution is that you have, but we don't have a lot of memory. So yeah.
I think there's something to be said for flipping it, because if you're gonna make a frozen version, then there's a reason why that was done. And so I don't, at first I was sort of put off by it, but I think it sort of makes sense that the frozen, if the frozen's there, it probably should be the default. Again, people do have a way of overriding it. They might have to ask some questions. They might have to learn something.
So, is there maybe a way to just notify users of what's going on, like at the level of the REPL or something? Just display a warning to the effect of, hey, this is being overridden?
I thought about that, but it's not easy. You don't really want to print out a warning every time you run a program that imports something.
Right.
So, and a lot of times they're not even using the route. So, yeah, I don't know that of a simple way of indicating that isn't kind of annoying in the long run. So,
too bad you couldn't make a list of what's frozen into the thing and compare it to the list, to the lib list, and say, hey, these are, and give, I'm talking about in the help function.
Mm-hmm.
Then you could just pop it. You just pop a help, and it'll tell you which ones of which lib entries also have frozen modules.
Suppose the out of memory methods just said consider using a frozen module or something, because that's when you're worried about it. That's when you get the error.
But like people don't have a way to do that.
Yeah. What do you mean they don't have a way to do it?
Like
have...
if they try to import a module and it runs out of memory, and then you say try to use it as frozen, they've got to build a new CircuitPython.
Oh no,
Well,
I just mean just say like, is this, import, make sure you import the frozen version of this module thing.
No, not building CircuitPython, like trying to come up with an error that explains to remove the library. I don't think I like it, but I'm just explaining
I mean, it's just like, right.
So, but isn't that a different? That's essentially what Brennan was just suggesting.
Yeah, that's just on an error. So I think right. If you just you could print that out on an error when you run into the problem.
Anytime there's an error, you just delete the library. That's it.
Right.
It's just basically you're saying, okay, here we we do have a frozen module, so get rid of it out of the lib library unless you really want to use it from the lib.
Right. So that's why I was suggesting. So you can do that statically by providing a separate bundle for that particular build.
But part of me thinks that you could just put a note in the guide where it said where we talk about putting libraries in to talk about this as well.
I mean, makes a good point.
Yeah, that was my thought as well.
That you can run into an error after importing a non-frozen module because it takes more memory. It's not like the difference between MPy and Pi where the actual RAM footprint is the same.
Right.
Like I think it would be cool if we could load raw code like as needed off the file system. Like there's no reason that we need to dynamically load the raw code from Flash rather than the file system.
Well, it doesn't even get loaded, right? I mean, I think that like the ideal thing is when you can load an empty, you can make the Flash be a cache of MPYs, or maybe even not a dynamic cache, maybe ones that you designate, and then when you import the thing, you go to see whether the MPY that you would have imported is the same as what's already in the cache. And if so, you don't have to overwrite Flash. So you're not wearing out Flash. You just say, oh, it's already here, and I'll just run it from there. It's already compiled. It's sort of like,
right. But if you're doing that dynamic cache to Flash, you don't really need it. You just load it from the file system every time you need it. Instead.
no, you can't load it from the file. You have to load it into Flash from the file system.
Why?
Because then otherwise you're using RAM. The whole point is that MPYs take RAM. So you can't run from the file system.
But
you can run Flash or RAM.
Why not? Like, why can't you load bytecode as needed from Flash or from the file system?
Where are you going to put it?
Like, if you're running a function that's in like a raw code structure on the file system, just load it into RAM while you run it, and then delete it after you're done.
Let it get let garbage collection throw it away when it's done. When you're done with it.
Well, I don't really know what is in an MPY. I think there are parts of an MPY that get put into dictionaries in RAM, and then there are parts that are just bytecode strings.
Right, and I'm thinking like the bytecode strings could be left off or out of RAM until they're needed, and then only in RAM as they're needed. Like,
but that's
yeah. Well, you know, remember the old trick we used to use in a lot of other places was you'd load. You know, that's how the event, the what do you call it? I'm sorry, I'm having.
You mean paging? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Okay.
not exactly. What I'm trying to say is the event, the eval loop. You know, what? I'm sorry, the REPL. Read, evaluate, print loop. That's what it's doing. You do the same thing that the REPL does.
Yeah, I just don't know how much
You don't have to create the. The whole point is you basically get rid of the. You're doing the same thing as the REPL does, except that you don't have to load tons of extra stuff. I've done it a couple of times. I've executed and figured out a way to execute a line of code and then retain the bytecode. And once it's done once, the memory goes back to the garbage collector and says, okay.
I think, I mean, it's definitely more work, but I like it because it means that we don't have to have different versions of all the boards. We don't have to worry about that. Like, we can use up-to-date code all the time.
All right, but I think that's a nice, as I said, it's like that's a great aspiration. The question is, before that happens, is it worth fixing this? Is it worth making this? Is it worth fixing this problem?
I think it's one of those things where we spend a lot of little bits of time, and it adds up to the amount that if we just fix the memory thing, like if we just made memory in general better, then we're just spending that time in a different way. I'm super biased about this. I understand that, and we should probably move on to another thing. But
yeah, okay.
I don't like this user frozen stuff. I think it's not a good long-term thing.
Right. I don't think it's a long-term thing either. I think it's with the M4, it's not necessary.
Right.
Okay. So
would changing sys path fix it in the near term?
It would fix this particular problem, the particular support issue. There are two ways of fixing the support issue. One is to have board-specific bundles, and the other is to flip is to put frozen before lib. Those are sort of the two.
I think you'd get a lot fewer support questions if you put frozen before lib.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's
it'll be
second one.
totally hidden. It may make the true support questions that come out of it more difficult to deal with.
And do you think that it should be done in 3.1 or wait for 4?
I think the temporary fix, at least, if you'll know if that's the problem immediately, if you're getting the wrong code, because it won't behave correctly. It won't behave the way the fix is explained. Then okay, you're going to have to put something into the code to reverse it temporarily to be able to test. It's only one line of code in your program.
Yeah, I'm not worried about. Yeah, I'm not really worried about the testing part.
Yeah,
very few people who are modifying these libraries.
But that same solution is also a very easy thing to explain to someone who is running into an issue.
Which same solution?
By just changing the syntax of the import to not use the frozen.
I see what you're saying.
Okay, well,
Okay, I'm not sure we're going. So yeah, I'm not sure we have reached the conclusion, but we'll talk about it offline.
If you want to switch the path, that's okay. But like, stop accepting that like frozen is a good solution for it. Like, we need to come up, or we should
it's an engineering
year or something like.
Yeah, it's a tactical engineering solution.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, although I say maybe we want to call it 4.0, like we can always like make what we call 4.0 now 5.0. Like, it's just version numbers. So like, if we're worried about breaking things because we are changing core behavior, we just release 3.03 as 4.0, and then everything else becomes 5.0. Like, that's totally fine. We can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good.
I didn't mean to imply that we had to like wait to do it for 4.0 to actually release.
Okay.
It's just a matter of like what we call the number.
Yeah.
And so just whoever, Dan, I think you'll end up doing it. So whatever you want to call it, just call it that.
Okay.
We'll work that.
Well, I'll sleep on this for a few days and maybe consult with you all some more.
Okay.
All right.
Let's move on. Thank you, everybody. That's what In the Weeds is for. Is these technical discussions.
Right.
Some people find fascinating, and those people can listen in, and the people that don't, check the notes. There's time codes. Okay, so Jerry had a question about Jerry, do you want to say it?
Yeah, just a quick. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but somebody can point me quickly. And Summersoft already gave me the first start. But there's been an annoying bug on the 52832, the NRF 52832, for quite a while now. That if you're executing code, Control C doesn't work. And I'd be happy to go and try and fix it, but I'm really having a hard time figuring out where.
That's an Alpha 1.
It's been for a long time. It's been since I can't remember when it broke, but it predates Alpha 1 a long ways. It was back in 3 somewhere.
But it's not broken on the 840.
It's not broken on the 840. No, it works fine. And at the REPL, when you type Control C, it prompts.
Okay.
It's just if you're executing a program, it doesn't respond, in the thing. So I'm just curious if somebody has a quick idea as to where to track that down.
So you're doing the Control C over the UART connection to the
No, through the USB.
Right, there's a UART.
Yes, through the you're right, through the
so there's a low level handling is different because it's not.
So is that handled up in Python itself, up in PY somewhere?
No, it's in the C code.
Yeah.
That does the like UART REPL stuff, and that's how this Control C works. Is it looks for the Control C character.
Okay, so it's in the UART. Okay, so it's be in the UART rather. It's just why it's not okay. The other one's USB, so maybe that's why it works one and not in the other.
Correct. That would be my guess. Is that what it'll do is it sets like a global exception state, for like the keyboard exception, and then if you have problems where like you can't control sleep specifically, then your like sleep loop code is not watching that exception to see if something happened.
Okay.
Like if it's not set. So,
All right. I don't want to take more time.
might-
I think that gives me a
might
better
look-
pointer.
Yeah, you might look in the ESP8266, which also uses UART.
Right.
I'm not
Okay.
sure if it's all that the same, but might be a good starting place to look also.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
yeah, I don't know the NRF stuff specifically enough to give you. It's the
No, that's a help already. I just been floundering around grabbing for control C didn't help a whole lot.
yeah. My gut is that it's the code that's like basically ingesting, like managing that UART connection that the REPL's going over. And
Okay.
then it's just not queuing the right exception. And then
I had forgotten that's the unique difference of the 832 that it's on the UART. Okay. That helps.
Okay, and then the last thing that we have in the weeds is harder, adding features versus smaller code trade-offs.
Yeah, this is a pretty low priority one if you want to call it good, given how long we've been going for the meeting.
I mean, I'm fine with meetings running late, but if other folks are not, then
Okay. It's just a very general thing that kind of came to mind as I was writing the library for that CAP 1188, and also for some other ones where I was thinking of like going back and adding some new features, specifically for like the HT16K33 thing, which has a cool key scanning capability.
Yep.
So all of these just kind of like, all right, I'll go do it, but then it bloats the code. And so how do we kind of make the tough trade-offs of like keeping things small so you can actually import it on our boards versus adding all the features in the world and all the bells and knobs that a particular hardware thing can do?
If you can add it as another class, another import, like the HID library is broken out into like core stuff and then other things. And that was Scott taught me that technique.
right. So it has to be in a different PI file.
Yeah.
Because like the units that you load are like per PI file.
So that's a way to segregate things to get around any kind of memory headroom issue.
Yeah.
And you can play tricks about dynamically loading. So if you do want to add, they're kind of nasty tricks. But like you can actually call import from within like a function, or even control flow code. Like if this, then import this other thing as you need it. It's not the best thing to import not at the top of the file, but if it means that you can load like a big chunk of code later.
So for example, you would have classes that would kind of segregate different functionalities. Like this HT16K might be a good one because it basically does LED stuff and it does keyboard scan stuff. So you can have like two separate classes that do those two different functionalities maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could use each independently, but you could also use both at the same time.
Use both if you had something that was doing both, like Trellis does.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach. And then the nice thing about that as well, of like if some device does more than one thing, is that you can have each of those individual classes have the APIs that are kind of standardized for that functionality. So I think key matrix is actually something that we're approaching of like, how do we manage this, and kind of standardizing on what that API looks like, given that we're doing more Trellis stuff. So I think that's really interesting and something we should think about. It's like, what's the standard key matrix API that we can expose that way?
All right. So now this capacitive touch one would be a little tougher example because it has a lot of knobs for the basic capacitive touch, like a low threshold, a high threshold, filterings you can turn off and on, all of these things. So what I currently did was, I don't have any of that in there. It's just the baseline bare bones, and it kind of works.
Right.
So do we kind of call it good with, that for an initial go and add in the other things as needed? Because I'm not really sure how you could separate that out into separate classes.
So go ahead.
I was going to say that, like, I don't know if you've looked much at the register library that I did ages ago.
I haven't. Yeah, I should probably do that, but I haven't.
It's kind of wild. The way that it works is that you basically can expose a bunch of properties, and the code to write and read those properties is the same. You just say, like, this is the address for this property versus this other property, which means that if there's a lot of code associated with it, then you end up sharing that code across all of them. The downside is that you do end up instantiating objects for each of those properties that gets delegated to. So if the code that's required to do it is the same across a number of things, then you actually end up saving memory. But it's a trade-off.
I think the general answer to it is, are you exposing features for the sake of exposing the features for the fact that they exist? Or are you exposing them because it's something that's useful?
Right.
I
And
feel like
that's kind of the general thing I've done currently, and like with this capacitive touch being a good one, where I just did the basics you need to get it to working, and I played around with it, and it seemed to work fine. So I called it good with that, and didn't add any of these other bells and whistles simply because they exist.
So I think that's an excellent way to go about this one. With my experience with Circuit Playground Express, I would say that there is the possibility for the need for threshold stuff to come up later, because we definitely ran into it with CPX where it was an absolute necessity. I feel like that's something that can be addressed when the issue arises.
Yep.
So I think that for your CapTouch one, rock it out, call it good. And we'll just, since obviously I will be keeping an eye on it. It's something we can keep an eye on, and if the issue arises, then we address it as it comes up. Because I know, I feel like we shouldn't be just exposing things just because they exist. I don't see a reason to have overcomplicated libraries simply because the sensor can do 62 things when people are going to do 2 things with it, and that's the important 2 things.
And I think for CapTouch also, like, the threshold was interesting. Of like, if there's a corollary, that's basically standard API now of having that the ability to set the threshold. So if you could do that, I would add that, but I wouldn't add more than that until you need it.
Can I share a thought from the beginner's point of view?
Sure.
Simple IO, for example, is a library that's really useful because it grabs a bunch of stuff that you need to get a project going. I'd be concerned about losing that kind of capability for the beginning user. If you have a lot of options for libraries where you have basic and advanced and super advanced or something like that, it's hard to keep track of. And if there's a way to both do that and have compiled libraries that kind of match the outcome of what you're trying to do collectively, I don't have a solution there, but I'm just throwing out the idea that for beginning users, the libraries, the way they're structured, at least today, they're kind of complicated.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we haven't done as well as like I would like to, and I think that Kattni has demonstrated her ability to do it as well. Of like, there are different levels of libraries, right? Like, there's the stuff that has to be C, that's the CircuitPython API, and then there's the like more advanced driver, like you got to know the chip name level libraries, and then there's also this layer that CPX is a great example of. We talked about doing it for Featherwings as well, that like does exactly what you're talking about, Seagrover, where it says like, if you have this board, we accumulate together these things and do all the initialization and stuff for you as well. And I think we could better serve that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent approach. I'm going a little bit beyond that and thinking more about what's my outcome, regardless of the board that I'm using. And like I said, I don't know how to abstract that to explain it, but there may be an opportunity there.
Right, and I think instead, you're just saying that like we can do aggregations like that for particular tasks rather than specific boards, which I think is true as well.
Yeah, or have a tutorial about how to teach somebody to do that for themselves.
All right, cool. I hope that helps, Carter.
Yeah, it does. And no easy answers, trade-offs.
Totally.
But yeah, good info. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to wrap this up since we are at an hour and 15 minutes. So thank you, everybody, for making it to the Adafruit CircuitPython Weekly for October 1st. This happens every week, and everybody is welcome to join. It is on Mondays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on our Discord channel. You can join the Discord by going to adafru.it/Discord. You'll find a bunch of us in the text chat there all week long, and then us in the voice chat on Mondays. The recordings go up on YouTube soon after, once I get them done. They're at youtube.com/Adafruit. There's notes linked to from those recordings as well. And then lastly, we do put links to the recordings in our Python for Microcontrollers newsletter that you can sign up with at adafruitdaily.com. So that's all the bits, and we'll see everybody next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, that's fair.